A new California law could make it easier for consumers to view their own data and actually hold corporations to be more accountable. The California Consumer Privacy Act is just the latest push by legislators to force transparency after years of high-profile stories about data leaks and misuse. The law is a response to the public outcry over the stockpiles of data companies and what they hold over citizens, all feeding algorithms that could drive society for the next 100 years. Joining me to discuss how all of this works, a man who knows it very well, Brad Smith. He's the president of Microsoft and co-author of a book I highly recommend, especially at a time like this, Tools and Weapons, The Promise and Peril of the Digital Age. Brad, thank you for being here. Thank you for writing this. This is a complicated time that so few of us even understand what we're dealing with, yet we spend countless hours giving away our information. So I want to start with what you believe the tech sector's responsibility is to people, because many companies derive their value from the data they collect from us.
Well, I think we have to start by recognizing that our goal is to serve our customers, protect their data. It's their data, not ours. We live in a time when technology has become both a tool and a weapon. Technology is being used by Team Rubicon, in the Bahamas to mobilize veterans. It's also being used as a weapon to attack our democracy. It puts issues like privacy at stake. One of the stories we share in this book is actually how that California law came together. And I think the big point that's so interesting is it came together because a real estate developer got enough signatures to put privacy on the ballot. And what it shows is that if you let people decide, they will stand up to protect their rights.
But here's the thing. That real estate developer got enough people to sign it, and it ended up on the ballot. You know what's even bigger and more powerful than that? The lobbying efforts of corporate America. And I'm not saying you personally, I'm not saying Microsoft, but you and I both know that monster companies that make monster amounts of money spend enormous amounts of lobbying dollars in Washington. So beyond simply let's get something on a ballot to protect mom and dad, most mom and dads have no idea what's going on here. So why should we believe that any sort of digital diplomacy or good behavior to protect the individual is really what's going to happen here?
Well, I think in a sense, that's what moved us to write this book. The only anecdote is to empower people with the information they need to understand these issues better, to make this more accessible to people, and then to use their voice. I do believe that there's a number of people trying to do the right thing. I went to Washington, D.C. in 2005 and called for the enactment of a national privacy law. 14 years later, we still don't have it.
Why not?
I think there was a long period of time when we were so excited about the promise of technology that we didn't really address head-on the challenges it was creating. Now, a new decade is emerging. People are more aware. Listen to all of the candidates in the presidential race. I think people rightly are focused on a new generation of challenges, whether it's security or privacy or bringing broadband to rural communities that don't have it.
In order to achieve what you call digital diplomacy, a digital Geneva Convention, how do we actually do that?
Well, it's one of the points that we take head on in the book. I think we start by reminding ourselves that after World War II, the governments of the world came together in a Geneva Convention and said they would protect civilians even in times of war. Now we see governments attacking civilians even in a time of peace. We detail in the book the efforts that really have started to come together. Last year in Paris, governments, companies, nonprofits came together. 67 governments have now signed what's called the Paris Call for Trust and Security in Cyberspace. These are important building blocks. Even though our own government is not necessarily part of it, it's a worldwide movement, and we need to fuel it.
But why would that be, right? The United States, the land, the home of the free, the land of the brave. Right now, we're in a moment where the American people think deregulation is the only answer, and they're not necessarily realizing that good regulation, smart regulation, is meant to protect people, not all regulation.
That's the argument we make. We do need government to move faster. If you look at the history of technology, there's so much we can learn from the past. And we need to take in part a cautionary tale, including from, say, the 1930s. Technology was racing ahead. Governments were turning inward. Not entirely unlike the challenges we face today. The world paid a huge price. We've got to learn from the past. As it's sometimes said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it can rhyme. There are certain rhymes we shouldn't want to listen to again, and we need to be inspired by the challenges we need to avoid.
You can make a data privacy pledge, or you are, because you're a company that actually makes product revenue. But there are monster companies out there that rely on this free data. That's how they make their money. Do you actually believe that some of these other companies out there, i.e. more social media type companies, are going to get on board with this?
I believe that there is hope.
Why do you think that, honestly?
Well, first of all, you have to persuade people to look at the long term. In the short run, a company can make more money by disregarding perhaps the privacy needs of their customers. But over the long term, if there's one thing we've learned, you've got to sustain trust.
But Brad, we are living in an absolute world of short-termism. Whether it's business or politics, we suffer the perils of short-termism every single day. Why do you believe in this example long-term is the answer? I agree with you fundamentally. I just live in the present.
The fundamental question is, what kind of world do we want to live in? If we all just embrace the challenges and give up, then that is not an opportunity to pursue a better path forward. We acknowledge readily in this book the headwinds. We have to be realistic. But my gosh, we need people, including people in business, including people who make technology, who are prepared to look beyond these challenges and do what it takes to do what I think most people actually want to see happen.
Amen to that. Brad, thank you for writing this, and thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Brad Smith. I recommend this book, Tools and Weapons, The Promise and Peril of the Digital Age. It is out tomorrow.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.